This is Bill Bradley. Each week you can hear my show, American Voices, where we listen to the stories Americans tell about their lives. But this week we have a special presentation for you. The music of Kinan Azmeh. He's a Syrian clarinetist and composer.
My personal belief has always been that you do art to experience emotions that you don't have the luxury of experiencing in real life.
He travels the world sharing his music, his love of the clarinet, and he also volunteers at refugee camps teaching Syrian refugee children.
They each gave me a name of a boy they liked in the camp. They wanted to write songs, like kind of love songs, and it was so inspiring to see that. It seems to me that maybe falling in love is one of the very few human rights that no authority can take away from you.
We'll talk about his music, Syria, and the significance of the arts in the face of violence.
My instrument doesn't do lots of things. It does not stop a bullet, it doesn't free a political prisoner, it doesn't bring refugees back, it doesn't do any of this stuff. But what it can do, it hopefully can inspire people to be proactive.
It's coming up right now. I hope you'll join me.
American Voices with Senator Bill Bradley is made possible by Barrick Gold, America's largest gold producer and a force for good in the communities where we live and work.
Kinan Azmeh appeared as a soloist for the New York Philharmonic and for the Seattle Symphony, among many others. He's also a part of cellist Yo-Yo Ma's Silk Road Ensemble, for which he won a Grammy. Kinan was born and raised in Syria and came to New York to study at Juilliard. He lives in Brooklyn, and he now has two bands, one in Damascus and one in New York. Kinan is here with me now. Kinan, thank you so much for coming on American Voices.
Thank you very much for having me.
Let's talk a little bit about your work with Syrian children in refugee camps. Can you tell us about your trips, what you've seen, and what all the violence has left you with?
I've done few trips, mainly to Jordan, Lebanon, but also I visit lots of refugee centers in Europe, mainly in Holland and Germany.
And these are people who've been displaced and who've been witnessed to, maybe affected directly by violence. And
absolutely.
They're in a refugee camp in a faraway country and not knowing what their future is, and you walk in.
That's absolutely right. I target two types of people. There are the refugees who are registered with UNHCR as refugees, but also I visit a lot what they call urban refugees. These are people who are not living in a refugee camp, but they still have a, refugee status too. And when you go and play, sometimes I simply just go and play. It's as simple as that.
And you're playing for the children?
I play for everybody. Usually children are the ones who are the most attracted to what I do.
Why? Because they're attracted to music.
They love music. It's fun, and I try to work within the refugee camps to have maybe a music lesson every now and then or an art lesson. And sometimes I try to bring with me musical instruments to give to the kids, so that we can play and form a little orchestra.
So tell us about two or three of the kids who've made the biggest impression on you.
One of the biggest impressions I had, it was towards the end of our few hours of music class. And there were a number of girls, maybe 8 or to 10 girls, the age of between maybe 8 and 12. So I asked them, okay, now we have some time left. What do you guys want to do? And they said, let's write songs. So I said, okay, we'll write songs. So I told them, what kind of topics do you like to sing about? And they didn't know how to answer. I said, how about we write songs about freedom or about home? And they said, no, we're done with that. And they each gave me a name of a boy they liked in the camp. They wanted to write songs, like kind of love songs, And it was so inspiring to see that in spite of all what's going on, they are kids and they are, thinking as kids. And because these kids were forced to become grown-ups in no time. Of what they have seen, what they have experienced. And to see that, it brought the optimist back to me, really.
That's great, and you're the agent of that for them too.
I hope so.
When the tragedy began to unfold, I hear that you didn't write music for a year. Tell us about that time and what was going through your mind.
That's right. The uprising started in 2011 in March. And I was, I found myself not not able to write any music for a long time. This came from how I thought about music prior to that. You know, there are two main school of thoughts when it comes to art making. One of them is that you do art to reflect on the world around you. Another school of thought is about the artist recreating the world in the most ideal way in his or her artwork. My personal belief has always been that you do art to experience emotions that you don't have the luxury of experiencing in real life. Going for what is fantastic. There's nothing called sad piece of music or happy piece of music. It's always more complex than that. And when, watching the news coming from home in 2011, I found myself experiencing emotions that were by far more complex than what I ever experienced. So the need for making music disappeared.
The U.S. is accusing the Syrian government of mass executions. The State Department says the Assad regime is operating this crematorium to cover up as many as 50 executions a day at a notorious prison located outside Damascus.
In 5 years of war, more than 250,000 people have lost their lives. That includes 4,500 children in Aleppo alone.
Witnesses say it was a chemical weapons attack, and in the video it appears to bear all the hallmarks.
I continue to play because that's what I do for a living, but I could not write anything. I thought everything I will write will stand way too short.
What emotions?
I didn't know. I didn't know how to respond to it.
It just stirred you up.
Yeah, I was paralyzed for about a year. But then a year later, I realized that you owe it to yourself to continue to write. If one has to think of what happened in Syria as people wanting to express an opinion, I have a tool that is that can be expressive at times. It's my main mean of expression, so might as well continue to use it.
And you wrote a song called A Sad Morning Every Morning.
Right.
And I'd like to listen to it a little bit and then have you tell us what you were thinking when you wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly hear the deep sadness. There's no question about that. What did you do musically to create that sense of pain that the music evokes? And tell us about the process of writing this and where you were in your life at that moment.
From March 2011 and on, it has been my daily routine. I get up in the morning, turn on my computer, and we say in Arabic, you put your hand on your heart, waiting for the bad news to come from home, right? So it was a sad morning every morning, in a way. And I will never forget that moment where, after a year of that, I did open my computer, and then I found myself looking for my instrument. There's something in art making that I, now thinking retrospectively about it, find it incredibly important, which is the urgency, where you feel, I have to express this right now. And apparently, I was maybe accumulating lots of emotional content. I wanted to let all of these emotions out. So I grabbed my instrument, I have always my microphone hooked to my computer immediately, in case something like this happens.
The moment comes.
And I recorded this, and the final product, what you have, was the first attempt at recording this piece.
Really?
Yeah, I keep it because it captured a very important moment for me. Because after that moment, I felt empowered, playing that piece and recording that piece.
When you were writing it, did you, think about it, or how much was thought and how much was feeling?
It's a very good question, because I still don't know the answer. When you write a piece of music, how much of it is structured and how much of it is spontaneous. This piece is a very simple single-line melody that just came to me. And I felt, I was watching the news, silent news in the background, and I played this. And that's how I felt. I'd like to think of this, it's not a composition, it's a documentation of a feeling, of a moment.
Well, has anyone, since you wrote it, heard it, and what What's been the response? Anything to you? I mean, for example, I'm thinking if people hear it, you clearly feel the sadness. If people want to help the people of Syria, what can they do?
The piece always got different responses. I think that's what excites me about the arts, that people will understand something different. You playing for 200 people, you'll have 200 different stories out of the same musical piece.
Right.
But I for a few years, I opened every concert of mine with that piece. For me, it was a grounding experience. It's not only me reminding myself, yes, I'm a lucky person to be able to go on stage. I have a roof over my head. But, a dedication to my countrymen and women, in the last few years. And also reminding people that, even if the tragedy is not in the news, it continues to happen and to unfold right now. How people can help? There's always many ways to help. I doubted for a long time, what can I do as a musician, I now know for a fact that my instrument doesn't do lots of things. It does not stop a bullet. It doesn't free a political, prisoner. It doesn't bring refugees back. It doesn't do any of this stuff. But what it can do, it hopefully can inspire people to be proactive. When I pick up my instrument and play, I'm being proactive too. And there are lots of ways people can help. As a musician, you can go and play for people. You can raise awareness. You can discuss. I do lots of trips to the camps where I try to play with kids. Sometimes people forget that kids playing is kids' main job, and nobody should take that away from them.
Mm-hmm. But when you opened your concerts with this piece, how did it affect the rest of the concert?
It's hard to tell. I don't know. Every piece I play has a story and has some kind of a background story to it. And I'd like to think of different musical pieces as different journeys. I don't like to impose sadness on people who come to see my concert, I think there are lots of happiness too,
Speaking of which is one called The Wedding.
Right.
So let's listen to The Wedding and hear you talk about that.
Absolutely.
Certainly a contrast to the previous piece.
Definitely. Some pieces change, they have a different meaning when the context changes. I wrote this piece about 10 years ago, back in 2007 or 2006 in Damascus. And the piece was inspired by the mood one can find in a Syrian wedding, or in a village wedding in particular. Weddings that take place in a public square, where even if you don't like your neighbor, you have to invite them, kind of wedding. I mean, people show up in these villages for this wedding because the families of the groom and the bride are supposed to feed everybody. So people do show up. And the musical landscape of these parties depend largely on the musicians who are going to come, what kind of instruments they bring. Like, they don't hire a band usually. The musicians from the village just show up and play. And I wrote this piece inspired by that mood. And now, when I play this piece, I always dedicate it to the Syrians who managed to fall in love in the last 6 years. Whether they get married or not, it's certainly none of our business. But but the fact that people have the resilience to fall in love, under all these bullets and all these bombs and even chemical attacks, people manage to simply fall in love. It seems to me that maybe falling in love is one of the very few human rights that no authority can take away from you. And I'd like to to be reminded by that. And this piece, give that impression of a village wedding. And it's certainly a happy feeling.
You're listening to an American Voices special. I'm Bill Bradley. My guest today is Kinan Azmeh, world-renowned clarinetist and composer. Find out more, visit us on Facebook. Our show page is facebook.com/American Voices with Senator Bill Bradley. Stay with us. Tell me two or three of your favorite clarinet pieces that you love playing.
I enjoy playing a variety of things, not only my own composition. I switch hat between being a composer and being a clarinetist. From the classical repertoire, I enjoy playing, of course, the standard, Mozart Clarinet Concerto,
Sure.
the Brahms Clarinet Quintet. But of my own music, Ibn Arabi Postlude is a piece of mine that I've written a few years back, and I continue to tour with it. It's a piece inspired by the writings of a Sufi philosopher. His name is Muhyiddin Ibn Arabi. He was born, in the 12th century in current-day Spain. Back in the day, it was Andalusia, and made a trip east, and he was buried in Damascus. He traveled looking for knowledge. And one of his main writing that actually inspired me was his notion that the freedom of thinking should be as sacred as religious beliefs. And that's something that I relate to, and now more than ever I relate to.
What do you mean? What do you mean now more than ever?
Now all the concept of freedom of speech and everything,
Right.
not only as a Syrian, but as a citizen of the world. I think it's more and more important.
Here we are in a studio, and as you were hearing it, you conveyed a sense of reverence, or you were in a place that was different than before it played.
Absolutely. The thing is, what I thought right now, I remembered myself when I recorded that piece, and how different issues were, occupying my brain back then. This is pre the Syrian uprising. This is pre lots of things that occupy my brain a lot right now. So I was trying to remember, what kind of thoughts I had when I recorded it.
So how'd you take up the clarinet?
That's a peculiar story. I started on the violin when I was about 5 years old. I had such a hard time learning the violin because I'm left-handed. So the whole task of holding the bow with my
I never
right
thought
hand
of that.
was incredibly difficult. My dad, being a very curious man by nature, he wrote to the Encyclopedia Britannica. Back in the day, this is pre-internet time. They had the system of coupons where you can send them any questions you have
Right.
by, snail mail, basically. And he wrote them, my son is 5, trying to learn the violin. He's not very successful. What do you suggest?
Because he's left-handed.
Because the left-handed issue. They wrote back suggesting that I can play with my left hand. I can either switch the strings, which mean I will never be able to play with an orchestra because my bow will,
Right.
poke my neighbor's eye.
Right.
Or I should switch to an even-handed instrument. And the only two options that fit that criteria, where you can use both hands equally, were either the piano or a wind instrument. And the clarinet was one of the best options. I always liked the whole idea of the traveling musician, so the piano was ruled out. And the clarinet, that was my choice.
It's easier to carry your clarinet on the road than it is the piano, that's
Absolutely.
for sure. So, as a child, did you enjoy playing music? I mean, you said you were 5 years old.
I don't think you can enjoy doing things that were... the clarinet or any additional music lessons were added homework. So did I enjoy? I don't know. My parents made me believe that you have to do this. Whether you like it or not, it's an additional homework. But I remember the thrill that I always felt when I played for people. Whether it's out, at home, playing with my parents for the guests who are coming for dinner. There was something super exciting. And I still feel it until now.
Right, but what is that magic that occurs between the performer and the audience, whether it's your parents and their friends or whether it's a concert hall?
Even when I play for myself, I actually do enjoy it. I don't see the difference between me as an audience and me as a musician. When I play, I'm the first person who receives the music I'm producing. So I enjoy it. And I think when you enjoy that, by definition, when people see that you're enjoying doing something, they will go on a trip with you. But there's a special bond, certainly, when you play for an audience. When you go up on stage, it's like you're sharing your deepest secrets with a bunch of strangers. And immediately there's a bonding experience right there.
Right, the vulnerability.
Absolutely. So
when did you decide you wanted to devote your life to music?
I never thought of it as such.
It just evolved.
It just happened.
It's like people ask me, when did you decide you wanted to be a professional basketball player? And the answer was, I didn't. I just evolved from high school to one level of competence to another level of competence, and it just happened.
Right. I think the way it works, you do something and you enjoy it, and I happen to enjoy lots of things. I did my double degree in music and electrical engineering, and when I finished from both, it was natural for me to apply to music schools for graduate school. So it's not that I took a decision, okay, do I have to choose? And I don't think I would like to dedicate my life only to music. Music is one of the many things that I enjoy doing. I enjoy cooking, I enjoy farming, I enjoy running.
But how did you decide to apply to Juilliard?
Before I applied to grad school, in 92, I won a scholarship to study chamber music in New Hampshire, in the middle of nowhere in New Hampshire, in a summer camp called the Apple Hill Center for Chamber Music. So here I was, I came here for a month to the U.S. between Boston, New York, and New Hampshire. And it was right there where I loved Boston. My first love was Boston, it wasn't New York. And I was impressed by the way music was taught. There was a very friendly and very easy atmosphere going on in that summer music camp. And it was there where I thought, oh, you know what, maybe I can be a musician one day, full time.
So the camp triggered that
The
imagination.
camp did trigger that, yes.
And said you could be a part of something very special.
Right. And the US also has this reputation of being, like the educational institutions being very open. And since I was doing a double degree back home, I thought the US would be a natural continuation of me trying to do it all.
So you came to America to Juilliard. What was it like, your experience coming to America for the first time? Not just the one to New Hampshire or Boston, but to New York. So what was it like coming to New York for the first time?
I was telling my parents we were taking a walk last night, and this very humid weather for me in New York reminds me of my first few days in New York, late August 2001. And I love that. I will never forget hearing the hum of the city. This noise that is the constant carpet of
noise.
I love it.
Everything from the garbage trucks to the honking
right.
taxis.
This is, a backdrop of the musical landscape of New York, which I adore. It sounds surprising a little bit. But I remember that, and I remember how inspiring I found the city to be. Not only Juilliard was a very inspiring place, of course, but the city itself. You learn so much from being in the city, just by walking around and checking out all the art that the city has to offer, is tremendous.
The dynamism is always exciting.
Absolutely.
And there are so many different places because there's so many different people.
Right. I think it developed me a lot, not only as a musician, but also as a person, being in New York. It challenges you, continues to challenge you, and you have to, work hard, but you can enjoy also what the city has to offer, which I think is equally important.
So Kinan, your parents are with you in New York.
Yes, my parents now split time between Syria. They live half of the year in Syria, but the other half, they split time between Cleveland, where my sister lives, and New York. And it's quite amazing to see how they are. When they're in Damascus, they're at home, of course. They're the adult couple at home, trying to manage within the circumstances, of course. When they go to Cleveland, they are put to work as grandparents. My sister has 3 kids. When they come to New York, they become the very young couple. They walk around. I think now they know New York by far more than I do. And it's great to have them.
So what do you love about the sound of the clarinet?
I do believe, of course I'm biased because that's the instrument that I love the most.
Well, sure.
No, but I do believe it's the closest of instruments to the human voice. I think all of us as musicians, we try to compete with the most perfect sound device we have, which is the human voice. And the clarinet has a similar range in terms of the octaves, but also in terms of dynamic range. The clarinet can be soft at times, but it can also be quite loud at times. And that's very similar to how the human nature is, I think.
So let's stay with that a minute. It's like human nature?
I think so. The fact that we have a dynamic range, not only the human, it can reflect different timbres, different volumes. It's very similar to how people, I think, live, not only speak, but live also.
So one of the things that I'm interested in, since these songs are so emotional, happy, sad, is what do you do musically to evoke this?
I wish I knew the answer to that. Sometimes it's also the logistics of it. If I'm commissioned to write a piece, then, you have a deadline to finish a piece. That's another thing. But you always have to look inside. You have to look inside to see what are you obsessed with right now. And it doesn't have to be a musical element. Lots of the time I find myself inspired by text, by poetry, by a painting, and then musical ideas come. There are pieces that the people you're playing with inspire a piece sometimes. One of the biggest moves I made is when I established my New York band. Because for me, that was a confirmation that I also New York is equally home for me as much as Damascus is. So I wrote this piece called Solo for Two. Of course, the title is quite funny, but Solo for Two, which means I'm the same, whether I'm here or I'm there. I'm the same person. And I wrote for my band in New York. So the process of writing the piece for its clarinet, bass, guitar, and percussion I was very inspired writing for these 4 people, John Hatfield, Josh Myers, and Kyle Sana, my members of the New York band.
So the band is 4 or 5?
Yes, we're a quartet.
Why do you call it a band as opposed to a quartet?
Back then we thought quartet was too...
Effete.
Maybe.
You wanted to be...
We wanted to be a band. We are a band, I guess.
But you're not playing rock and roll.
No. It's jazz meets Arabic music and everything else in between.
Well, Kinan, thank you so much for coming on American Voices.
Thank you very, very much for having me.
I've been speaking with the world-renowned clarinetist, Kinan Azmeh. This has been a special presentation. We'll be back next week with another episode of American Voices. Message me your thoughts on our Facebook page. I love hearing from you. Our show page is facebook.com/American Voices with Senator Bill Bradley. Senior producer Devorah Clark, technical director James Bilodeau. Show was recorded by Tim Vega. We had help today from James Maresco. Special thanks to Chris Gibbons, Eric Gonzalez, and David Rodriguez.
American Voices with Senator Bill Bradley is made possible by Barrick Gold, America's largest gold producer and a major supporter of education, the arts, and environmental conservation in the western U.S.
Join me next time on American Voices. Thank you for listening to American Voices here on my YouTube channel. For more interviews celebrating the goodness and creativity of the American people, click the subscribe button below.